What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Ryan Moody, Jimmy Smith, our MMA show. Jimmy, you just put up your UFC 248 breakdown, so I haven't had a chance to listen to it, but if you can hear this, you have an extra couple minutes, 20 minutes of your day, I don't know how long the video is. Go ahead and check that out. Jimmy, we jinxed this card. I firmly believe that. We talked about the main event in a way that only we could set up epic failure. So let's start this.
We're not alone. Let's at least give ourselves that.
We are going to proceed through the card and get to the main event. That way, if anyone falls asleep during our recap, at least they got to the end of the show. We're going to start Max Griffith, Charles Oliveira. You know, to me, Max just couldn't get his timing down. I think the eye injury made this worse. Oliveira did a great job with leg kicks, body kicks, and really kept Max from rushing in with uppercuts. But then he used those uppercut feints to set up kicks and straights, which just worked masterfully. I think the only problem I have, when it came down to chase a finish, neither guy did. Now, in the pre-show, we both saw this going Max's way. I actually will admit I saw this as Cowboys' fight. We ended up being right in the long run, but I wouldn't have had an issue with this fight going to either guy.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Oliveira showed a little bit more savvy, a little bit more veteran. He had a little bit more in the tank, a little bit more in the scrambles, a little bit more positionally. It was just, he had the slight edges when it mattered. That's a good way to put it. He had Mount, obviously, in the last frame. Max Griffin turned around and started strong. Turned around and ended strong, but it was a little bit too little, too late. Very, very close fight. Oliveira has this tendency to hold his hands really low and bait you into a brawl and kind of make it a war. Max Griffin initially was doing a very good job landing straight punches. Jab, straight right, was there all night. But Alex Oliveira kind of baited him into his kind of fight and ended up winning and had a little bit more on the ground tactically. That was the difference in a very close fight, in my opinion.
Do you think this keeps Cowboy in the UFC? We had both kind of openly said this might be the exit should he lose. Is it now not the exit because he won, or do you still think this may be a situation? He showed a win, but he didn't show, he lost, but he showed a competitive loss, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, the thing is, for Oliveira, for Oliveira, he showed he can still have entertaining fights with mid-level talent. The opening of a pay-per-view is a good spot for him. He'll always get it started the right way. He's very energetic. Max Griffin showed he can still hang with that kind of guy. Very, very close fight. It could have gone Max Griffin's way, and it did to one judge. So I don't think it hurt either guy. An entertaining fight in a deep weight class when they need so many fights helps you. You know, Max Griffin had a very entertaining fight that was really fun to watch. He kicked it off the right way. They need guys like that. So many cards, so much mid-level talent. You need a Max Griffin, even though he lost. You need a Max Griffin to, to fill in those gaps in deep weight classes where you're going to need a lot of events and a lot of people to step up, maybe short notice against big names. Max Griffin is willing to do that, so he'll stick around for a bit.
I guess I worded that strangely. Is Cowboy going to stick around now that we had said with a loss he could possibly see himself out the door? Was this enough of a win for you to see him stay in the UFC, or is his value still diminished to the point that maybe he does need to look at other options?
No, I think Cowboy sticks around. I really do. Both guys had an entertaining fight in a war, and where do they fit in the division? They're not. I mean, Alex Oliveira, in that 10 to 20 range, he's going to go to war with those guys, and he's going to give a good accounting of himself, and he's going to be a good gatekeeper. If you blow Alex Oliveira out of the water, you're ready for that top 10 consideration. If you can't, you're stuck in the mid range for a while. Good gatekeeper, energetic, entertaining. He's got a good mix to stay in the division for a while.
Moving up the card, Neil Magny, Ling Jilang. We talked about Neil a lot in the pre-fight show. Let me just say, this is the best Neil Magny I've ever seen. The pace, the volume, the pressure was nice to see. It's not really that Lee got exhausted. Magny just used cardio kind of as a weapon. Lee had a real issue with takedowns. Magny did a great job in the clinch. You could tell Lee had trouble with range. And Magny just kept the pace and fought with intent, bell to bell. I think the end of round 2, he was slamming him. The end of round 3, he was kind of going for a crown and pound before he lost a a scramble. This is the fight that I needed to be proved wrong. I mean, Neil Magny really came out here and put on the performance of a career. Looked fantastic doing it and made his opponent look subpar when his opponent isn't subpar, which is what you kind of want to see when you're questioning whether a guy is ready to stay at the top of the division or not.
Yeah, I mean, I am proud to be wrong in this one. I really thought the beating he received from Ponzinibbio and the time off would be a little bit more of a factor. Ring rust wasn't an issue. He looked sharp from the beginning. He looked confident from the beginning. He wasn't gun shy. Even the beginning when Jingliang was aggressive and landed some good punches, he didn't fall apart. It didn't remind him of kind of previous failures, which is what happens a lot of times when guys have a serious beating, which he did at the hands of Ponzinibbio. Your body just reacts in a different way to aggression. You get hit and you kind of, oh man, it kind of takes you back there and you backpedal a little bit more than you should. I didn't see Neil Magny doing that. So to me, this was a guy who physically was the superior fighter. In terms of experience, he was the better fighter. Tactically, he was the better fighter. I thought he had the gifts to look dominant in this fight. I didn't know he'd put them all together as well as he did. The fact that the past was the past and it didn't seem to be a factor in this fight, that was the big issue for me. And during the breakdown, the pre-fight, when you and I were talking about it, I said, look, before the Ponzinibbio fight, I would pick Neil Magny in this fight 9 times out of 10. I think he's the better fighter. But God, I'm just wondering if the time off and the destruction at the hands of Ponzinibbio is going to have a lingering effect. It didn't. It was a non-issue and a non-factor, and I'm really glad for that. It's good to see Neil Magny have a fight like this and be maybe a top 10 guy in a very crowded division.
Moving up, Beneil Dariush, Dakar Close. This was an odd fight early. Had kind of a strange grappling situation up against the cage where a body triangle was trying to use to get a choke and just couldn't get it done. And then pretty much early second round, they just decided to start throwing down. And I think Dariush was more fundamental, even in those wild exchanges. I think when people look back at this, they look at these almost as like a 50-50, right? You can win or lose when you kind of get reckless. But honestly, anytime a grappler's favorite knocked out somebody, it's a big deal to me. We mentioned in the pre-show, his power gets dismissed. And I think now with this kind of mouthpiece flying out, highlight knockout, that may change a little bit.
His chin looked great. His power was there. His grappling was on display in the first round. And I agree with you. I know you didn't see my individual breakdown that I just put on YouTube. That's what I said. What I said was, look, whenever hey, screw it, let's throw down, you're flipping a coin. You're giving up your veteran advantages. New guys or physically talented guys, they typically want to brawl with a veteran like Dariush. I don't want to get in a technical ground game with this guy. He had closes back most of the first round. You don't want to grapple with this dude. You don't want a technical, tactical, experience-based fight where it's more about savvy and kind of ring IQ. You don't want that against Dariush. You want a brawl. And that's what Close initiated in round 2. It was like, okay, let's throw some big leather and see if I can get this guy out of here. And he did hurt him. Dariush was stung more than once. He was hurt more than once. He just came up with a left hand that would have knocked out a rhinoceros and finished him. And I believe it was a left hand. Just crushed him, just ripped his soul right out of his body. And he kind of took a gamble on that, but finishing is an instinct, not a skill. Getting a guy out there is knowing when to turn it on at the right time. It's a risk. It's a gamble. You might get finished too. But I thought Beneil Dariush made the gamble, the wager at the right time. He gave up his experience edge in getting into a brawl, but he did it at the right time. And great performance by him. Of course, he got performance of the night, got a nice little bonus there, another 50 grand in his pocket. I think he deserved it. But great stuff by Beneil Dariush. He's still that mid-level 10 to 20 ranking guy that if you can get past him, you're ready for the big time. I think he's a great gatekeeper at this weight class.
Did he do an odd call out afterwards? Did he call out Robert Whittaker, or was he congratulating him on being a good father?
I had the volume turned off because I was studying it because I did the post-fight for SiriusXM, so I didn't hear any of the interviews. I have no idea what he said. No clue. So comment section, going to have to help you out with that one. No idea.
All right. They had a strawweight fight last night, from what I understand, right?
Yeah, I heard about it. I heard things.
I heard
I saw photos and memes.
I definitely saw photos and memes. So here we go. If you go back and watch the first round, I would not have believed that they were even on strikes. Even if you counted the one that Joanna got kind of post bell, but whatever. I thought Zhang was clearly landing with the damage. I had said that she was going to finish her in 2 or 3, and albeit for a couple minutes there, I looked like I was going to be right. But, we kind of saw the fight play out in a way that we thought it could, where Joanna just started adding up volume. And Zhang doesn't fight well from behind. When she's losing exchanges, which we really hadn't seen, when she's losing clinches, when she can't really get inside, things didn't look like they were going to go the best for her. And I think at the end of that fight, you got the sense that Zhang Weili needed a home run shot. She needed a knockout. And if we know that watching, we know that Joanna knew that fighting. We know that her corner knew that cornering. And the longer you prolong that moment of, hey, you need this to secure a win, the worse it gets for you. I think everybody saying this is an instant classic was great and fantastic. I worry about Joanna's health just a little bit based on the head swelling, all the memes and jokes aside. But this was an incredible fight, a fight that really told a story. I think that's what we look for when we want entertaining. We got told a story. We saw from the beginning to the end something that had various levels, a lot of drama to it. And I think, if anything, at this point, as this fight concludes, we've only seen one finish on the main card, okay? I didn't feel like we were getting decisions. I thought that we were getting great fights, exciting fights, close fights, that you don't always need that, I'm sure even though you were listening to the sound, you saw, the reaction Cormier and Joe Rogan had to the knockout. But you don't need those moments to have a good, entertaining, and a fulfilling card. And although we're about to change all that in the next fight, this pay-per-view was really living up to the billing as we got through this fight.
It was, for sure. And let's keep it. It was, up until this point. This was the greatest fight in women's mixed martial arts history. I really believe that. And I called a bloody mess on Friday in Invicta, if you didn't get a chance to see it. It was the bloodiest women's MMA fight I'd ever seen was on Friday. And then the best women's MMA fight I've ever seen was on Saturday. So hats off to these ladies. Rarely in mixed martial arts, in my opinion, do the numbers tell the story, right? We're not baseball. We're not football. I know they try to integrate these like punch stats and stuff like that. A lot of times it just doesn't tell the story, okay? It did in this fight. When they played, they showed that stat at the end where Joanna Jędrzejczyk landed more body shots, more leg kicks, but Weili Zhang landed more to the head. That, to me, was a story of the fight. I thought Jędrzejczyk looked sharper. I thought she looked faster. She was more versatile. But when Weili Zhang stepped in and threw big punches, they landed and they hurt Jędrzejczyk. They hurt her bad. You saw the swelling on her forehead. Her nose is broken. She was a mess. I mean, Weili Zhang didn't look great either. But to me, that was the story of the fight. And I'm not mad at people who thought Joanna Jędrzejczyk won. I'm not. It was, do you believe, 2 body shots and a leg kick are worth 1 right hand to the face? That was the story of the fight to me. That was the trade-off. That's the decision the judges had to make. Weili Zhang stepped forward and threw power punches to the head. She was headhunting. And it was effective. Joanna Jędrzejczyk was working the head to the toes with good combinations. But when it came to more effective damage, I thought Weili Zhang did that. People who disagree are not wrong. It's about what you see and what you value, because they both did damage in different ways. But Weili Zhang headhunted. That was obvious, and she did a ton of damage.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree completely. Like I said, if you go back and you watch that first round, and at the end of it, you say, hey, these girls threw equal and landed equal. To me, I would say, man, well, it looks like Joanna's losing. And we both came in professing Joanna would lose the fight. In this situation, we'll backtrack to Neil Magny. I'm glad that I'm wrong. She proved a lot to me. She proved a lot about heart and toughness and desire. She sold me on a rematch. I'm not ready to anoint this as the greatest women's fight of all time, because it's easy to say that right now. I can't think of a better one off the top of my head, but
that's the thing to me. I mean, I've been in this game 20 years. You've been in a long time. I can't think of a number 2. I can't. I mean, like, there have been some good fights. The difficulty with women's MMA throughout its history is it's usually a one-woman show. I've seen some beatdowns. I've seen some great performances. You know what I mean? Holly Holm, Ronda Rousey, a lot of people consider that a great fight. Holly Holm beat the brakes off of Ronda Rousey in that fight. Beat the brakes off of her. Gina Carano, Cyborg. Cyborg just crushed Gina Carano. Nunez, Cyborg. Nunez knocked her ass out. This was a back and forth war that was bloody. It was aggressive. It was technical. And I didn't know who won at the end. I barely, I agreed with the judges. I thought Weili Zhang won it by 1 round. But I'm not mad at that judge that had it 48-47 Yin Jacek. That says a lot. When I'm trying to think of a competitive number 2 women's fight all time, it's hard to even think of one. To me, this is far and away the best one.
We have more moments in women's MMA than we do fights. This was the fight.
Very true.
Right, this was the fight.
Yeah.
So, all right, now we get to downshift. Since you use football as a reference, I honestly can say now I know how Manti Te'o felt. Because, Jimmy, we got catfished really bad. I know we talk about a lot styles make fights, okay? And they do. But there's also some times where styles make this. And I realized in going back and listening to the post-fight show, or pre-fight show rather, and looking at the comments, some people took us to task that we really took separate paths with Israel. I talked about a guy that fought older than himself, that fought with, a higher level, really good with feints. You kind of talked about a guy who was kind of just growing into himself, brimming with confidence and things along those lines. I didn't realize how fundamentally different we were. And I actually posted this direct quote. I realize now we set this main event up to be an awful split decision. We apologize in advance. I posted that 4 days ago. I had no idea how true
that you would be so right.
How true I would be. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's at the end of the day, this is the reality. I'm okay. I'm okay with round 1, and I'm okay with round 2 being feeling out rounds. I'm fine with it. It happens, especially in 5-round fights. The challenge to me becomes when they go into the start of the 3rd round and Dan says, listen, you got to give the judges something to score here. I think at that point, he's looking at them and saying, I'm expecting a fight. I'm expecting more. I'm expecting something here that you're not offering. And I think it needs to get to the point where you start to deduct points for running halfway around the cage, for willfully disengaging from contact. Now, they started that 3rd round with a spark, but it only lasted about 2 minutes.
Didn't last. Yeah.
The doctor and the referee played bigger parts in this fight that I remember than any actual punch. I know Yo got some really nice overhands in, and I know they landed, they connected, but I think this is one of those times, and I know it's an often argumented point. When you make that break in between rounds to say, hey, listen, I need to see something here, you have to start threatening point deductions. And when somebody starts to run away, you have to say, listen, you do it again, I'm going to take a point. And you have to make them fight. Because when you don't, you get that. And you know what? Here's the thing. At the end of the day, they weren't going to put on a performance. We have to understand, based on everything we just said, they weren't going to put a performance that lived up to Weili and Joanna. It wasn't going to happen. But what we got was so much more incrementally worse. That made it a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, it did. I mean, this would have been a bad fight anyway. I've had people saying it was the worst title fight they'd ever seen. You got to go back to the really weird defenses by Anderson Silva, which is a great way to kind of, there are a lot of parallels here. Obviously, it was the same division, everything. A striker everybody thought was, the greatest in the division, maybe the greatest of all time. And against Damian Maia and Talis Leites, he had these bizarre performances. And this was kind of one of those, this was a bit more understandable just because Yoel Romero is so dangerous. And you just have to be cautious with this guy, and you really got to find your rhythm. And he could never do that. The issue with taking points away is referees really don't want to be a factor in title fights. I'm not saying they shouldn't take points away. You are correct. You are correct. You're just not going to find a lot of referees who want to step in and take points away in pay-per-view title fights. There's a lot on the line. They don't want to be the reason somebody walked out with a belt. They don't. Now, would that have changed the outcome? I don't know. I don't know what could have made either one of these guys take bigger risks considering what they were facing. Now, Dana White, if you listen to or read about any of the post-fight interviews, Dana White kind of laid this on the feet of Yoel Romero. I agree and disagree with him in that I don't think it's fair to lay a bad fight on one guy. It takes two to tango. This was not Caleb Starnes versus Nate Quarry, where Caleb ran and Quarry didn't. So both guys didn't initiate well. Both guys were timid. But Yoel Romero had more to lose. Dana's right about that. Dana said, if you didn't read it, he said, look, Yoel Romero, at his age, with the number of title shots he had, this was his last shot. And he didn't do anything. I do agree with that. In that, had Israel Adesanya lost this decision, which I think he deserved to lose, he's young, he's got star power, he's got charisma, he's lost one fight, and at the end of the world, he can climb back pretty easily. Yoel Romero's probably done in terms of title shots at 185 pounds. Period. End of sentence. So he had more to lose. I don't say it's his fault necessarily, but he certainly had more to lose and he lost it. I was surprised we didn't see a little more fire, considering it's probably the last shot he's going to get. And I thought Yoel Romero won the fight simply because the only punches of any value were thrown by Yoel Romero. The only punches landed of any value I thought were landed by Yoel Romero. Could he have done more? Yes. Should he have done more? Yes. Should Israel Adesanya have done more? Yes. But it's one of those where people said, yeah, I thought Izzy won, or yeah, I thought Yoel Romero won, but oh my God, can I scrub this fight from my cold, dead eyeballs? I just want to forget about this fight. I agree. A terrible one that Israel Adesanya, in order to be the star that we know he can be, needs to move past very, very quickly.
I guess to that point, the challenger needs to absolutely take a title away if it's going to go to a decision. And I didn't see an absolute takeaway. I will offer to you, though, in what you'd mentioned before about the referee, then, if that's your opinion, then that's fine. But I would also warrant that if that's the stance, you don't say anything to them. You don't bring them together before the third round and say, listen, I need to see a fight here. If there's nothing behind it, you're not in there to give suggestions to them as to what they're supposed to do. You're supposed to be in there and call the fight. Once you input your suggestion of, I think that you two need to do something more to fight because the judges don't have anything to score, then you've interjected yourself in such a degree where you have to become the authority figure. If he doesn't say anything, I'm not going to sit there and say, well, then you need to take a point or you need to do something for inactivity. The fact that he willfully stood there with them, looked them both square in the eye and said, listen, I need to see something. Not me, the judges, the fans, the people that are just put their cell phone back down because they're making those cool little lights in the background. That's what he was saying. And to me, if you're going to issue a warning, there has to be a threat. And there was no threat. It wasn't, hey, I'm going to start doing this. Any other judgment is met in there with a threat. Hey, close your hands. You keep your fingers out, I'm going to take a point. You grab the cage again, I'm going to take a point. Everything else is met with a suggestion and then the action. He didn't do that. He just gave the suggestion of, hey, you might want to start fighting. We're in a championship fight. Okay, well, what if we don't? We got 2 more rounds of...
Make me.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Make me. Right, yeah.
Yeah, anything else, you make them, right? You grab the point again. You grab his glove again. You grab whatever, I'm taking a point. I know I said you grab a point, but whatever. You grab the glove again. You grab the cage again.
That's a good way to put it, though. You grab the glove again, I'm going to grab a point.
Yeah, you're going to... Exactly. I'll grab the point, you grab the glove.
You grab the fence, I'll grab a point, right.
As far as...
I agree with you in that regard. Once he steps in and says, hey, do this, it's got to have some teeth.
Yeah.
It's got to have some teeth. You got to be... You're right. Or what? Or you're going to what? You have to have that as a... That I totally agree with you. Don't bring them together and suggest they start fighting. You're right. If you're going to interject yourself in it, which, as I said, refs are hesitant to do, well, then don't bring them together at all. If you're not going to threaten them with some point deduction. I completely agree with you on that one. That's an excellent point.
So, all right. We'll close this out since you mentioned Dana's comments. Israel Adesanya, after the fight, says about Paulo Costa, who I believe was wearing makeup, ironically enough. I'm going to leave it at that. There's a lot of makeup on for a man, but
loud shirt.
Yes. He says, quote, "I'm going to sleep that guy." The first thing I thought to myself was, shit, you just slept me, Israel. Of course he's going to feel threatened by this.
Zing! Boom! I'm sleeping too. Hey, yeah. Slept the whole crowd. Yeah, there's a ton of jokes you can say about that one. But about the rehabilitation, and great champions have had bad performances and come back and superstardom. It's not the end of the world. It's not the end of his career. He's gonna have to sleep Yoel Romero. I'm sorry, Paulo Costa. He's gonna have to do something to wash this taste out of the mouth of the fans. He's going to have to do something. I believe he can and he will, especially against somebody, Paulo Costa, who's a bit more aggressive. I think he can and he will do that. I mean, of course, we'll break it down as it gets closer, but he certainly can. And I think that's to be his goal when it comes to Paulo Costa is, okay, I have to make everybody forget about my last performance.
I know that we've kind of went both sides on this when we talked about the entrances. We sat here and we've pushed, guys like Tyson Fury, Wilder to come out with these elaborate entrances. We talked about, how maybe some of them are needed in the UFC. I did see a little bit of pushback that Israel came out again with another choreographed intro, which I have no problems with. However, if you do that, as you kind of almost mentioned there, the performances have to match that. And I think he has to understand that when he sets that precedence for himself, that there's going to be pushback on the other side when those, entrances, as humble as they may be, this one was a very lackluster one for that matter, you have to have performances. And he's setting himself up for more than negative fan pushback. Almost last night, he almost felt like he took a heel turn, in the way he responded to people being negative against him and basically saying the contrarian line of, I do what I have to do to win, and that's what my position is. Your position is to watch as a fan, and if you don't understand that, too bad, you still watch, didn't you? I get how that frustrates people, especially, like I said, you've got... This could not have happened at a worse time. This fight could not have happened on a worse time. You had every fight up in front of this was exciting and had moments, and in fact, you just said one of them may have been one of the greatest fights ever, and then you just get... It not only let down, but like I said, a fight that lets down on so many different levels. It's difficult to take away anything of it. It was just a bad fight. I mean, just styles make bad fights, and this was a really bad time for that to happen. But it did. I hate that it's going to take Yoel Romero's championship credentials away in the UFC, that he may never fight for another title. But I firmly believe if you look at that fight, I feel like you thought he won. I guess. Unless you've been in that position, it's hard to understand who to blame more. Do you blame the person for not letting you punch them and running away, or do you blame yourself for not putting yourself into the fire more? It's got to be a weird feeling.
Yeah, it is. It is. But at the end of the day, he walked out the loser by decision. Whether you agree with it or not, I don't agree with it, but at the end of the day, he walked out the loser by decision based on inactivity. Whoever you thought lost that fight, you believe they didn't do enough. Not that their opponent did more, but that they didn't do enough. That's tough to live with. Had it gone the other way, I'd be saying this about Israel Adesanya. The loser of that fight didn't do enough. It's not that their opponent did more. They didn't do enough. That's an important aspect of what we're talking about. They didn't get overwhelmed by a superior fighter. Israel Adesanya, whether or not you thought he won, did not overwhelm Yoel Romero. He was not the clearly superior fighter. If you believed he won, you believed he did a little bit more. Which means the loser has to say, I could have done more. Whether you believe he lost or not, he could have done more. And if it were the other way around, I'd be saying this the other way around. So that's a tough thing to live with. Sometimes you get outworked. Sometimes you run into a superior fighter. You get caught, whatever it is. There are a lot of ways to lose a fight. That's what makes MMA so interesting. But to lose a decision because you didn't do enough, that's hard to live with.
All right. Well, hopefully what's not hard to live with is a couple days on the podcast, because we will be back in a few days. We appreciate you guys checking this out, and we will be back very shortly with more commentary.